Hey everyone, welcome back. It's not often that we hear a US business owner say it out loud, that he genuinely misses Canadian customers and didn't realize how much he relied on them. That's pretty rare. He actually said he was blown away by how many Canadians aren't coming down anymore. And normally, when US businesses start to struggle, they'll blame anything they can. Exchange rate, weather, time of the year, moon, I don't know. I'm just throwing out random shit. Anything except the real reason, which is their president. So we'll go through this one together. I also wanted to show you another report that should serve as a reminder of our values and our beliefs, and why we're doing this in the first place. I know some of you don't even call it a boycott anymore. You call it a new way of life. So this report here is going to be a good reminder of why we're doing this. And last, one of our viewers shared an extended version of the Canadian immigration lawyer interview. There's a few extra segments that I did want to share with everyone. Today's backdrop comes from Anthony, who sent in this great skyline photo of downtown Toronto. The last time I was in Toronto was way back in 2009. So honestly, I think it might be time for me to do another visit. Thanks for sending this in, Anthony. Before we start, just one quick thing I want to address. Some of you have been emailing me and asking me when I'm going to launch my merch store. I thought about it, but like what Todd Maffin said in one of his videos, there's no guarantee that the fulfillment company is going to be shipping it from Canada. And if the merch comes from the US, my audience would be charged with tariffs and taxes. That's a problem. I've spoken to Todd about this, and he said he's going to let me know when he's able to find a Canada-only merch store. So I'll keep you guys posted. All right, let's get started.
And thank you. A popular Las Vegas brewery has served its last beer this weekend.
Huddle Brewing Company survived the pandemic, but they could not survive declining tourism.
Okay, I know it's only about 5 seconds and I already paused. But do you remember how many US tourism officials, government officials, and US businesses said that they've been through these ups and downs before? That they made it through COVID, and that what we're seeing right now is just a phase. Well, my gut tells me we're going to hear a lot more of these stories. Stories that they survived COVID, but couldn't survive the Trump slump.
Fox 5's Victoria Saha joins us now live in the Arts District with more. Victoria?
Huddle Brewing Company has been a staple in the Arts District ever since they first opened their doors during the pandemic. They were able to get through that, but the owner tells me nothing could have prepared him for the dip in foot traffic. Huddle Brewing Company officially served its last beer Saturday.
It was a position where we needed to expand or die, and we weren't able to put the expansion in place quick enough.
What were numbers looking like, if you can give us a general sense? Like, how much of a loss did you face this year?
This summer was brutal, 25-30% down.
Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know in the past I've been very critical when it comes to the Las Vegas media and the Las Vegas bloggers, to the point where a Las Vegas blogger got his feelings hurt so badly that he put a copyright strike on one of my videos. I guess he didn't like hearing the truth, that Canadian and international tourists actually mattered to his city. But we've seen this before. There have been other Las Vegas businesses showing the same decline in the past, like the pizza guy who went from making 80 pizzas a day to just 7 or 8. Now sure, Vegas has gotten expensive. $9 for a freaking Starbucks Americano, or $30 for a damn burger. But even with those prices, there would still be a solid number of Canadians and international travelers who still would have gone. That's only if Trump wasn't around.
Down enough that owner Skip Norfolk struggled to pay his team and vendors.
We're not getting the volume of people that we used to in the Arts District, and here we are.
Norfolk blames declining tourism, especially from Canada.
I was blown away how many Canadians aren't coming to Las Vegas right now. September, October, November, December, they make up almost 12% of what we do here, and we've gotten very little or zero.
Very little or zero. Yeah. That's when it's time to bring out the Antonio Banderas meme. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm rubbing it in. And to be fair, I'll give this business owner full credit for actually admitting it. How many business owners would actually go on the air and say that to their domestic audience? I've watched at least maybe like 200 to 300 reports, and I can probably count on two hands the number of times a business owner has been this honest about Canadians without making excuses.
Canadian tourism dropped 20% in August. The LVCVA said many stopped visiting after U.S. imposed tariffs. Overall, tourism fell 4.4% compared to last year.
I didn't realize how heavily we do rely on tourism here.
But local customers also relied on this place too.
There we go. patio.
This was a regular routine. We like to bounce around a few different locations. This is always on the venue of places to stop.
We're all original, like just from day one. We believed in Skip and the team here, and it's just terribly sad to see them go.
Those guys tell me they were here when that very first beer was poured, and we're here again for the last one too. Reporting from the Arts District, Victoria Saha, Fox 5 News, local, Las Vegas.
Thank you, Victoria. And the brewery stayed open a little longer to sell what was left of the inventory, but the gates are now shut.
And in my very non-expert monotone opinion, expect more gates to be shut in 2026. Now moving on to the next report, also out of Las Vegas. This one doesn't mention Canada at all, but it's still an important reminder of why we're boycotting. Or maybe a better way to say it, why we've changed our way of life without the United States. Now I'm going to fast forward through this one, because the report focuses on the orange guy's speech. And like many of you, I really don't want to hear his voice. What I do want to focus on is the US citizens and their reactions. So let's take a look.
Historically, in the modern political era, midterm elections have been very difficult for the party currently controlling the White House. Republicans are optimistic, though, that as the economy stretches into 2026 and beyond, that Americans will gradually feel better. Joe St. George, Scripps News Group, Washington.
And President Trump touched on a lot of hot-button topics that matter to you, like housing, jobs, immigration, healthcare, and tariffs. I took the president's message to locals to get their thoughts on the president's address. What do you think about the job that President Trump has done?
He's doing a good job.
Yeah. What do you agree with him on?
Everything. Just about everything.
Why is that whenever a Trump supporter is asked the actual details, they always fall back on the vague lines like, I agree with him on everything, he's doing a good job, or whatever else they want to throw out there? I'm going to guess it's because they don't actually know what Trump is doing. Kind of like this guy.
So, I didn't really do much research, so I can't make comment, but I just trust Trump. Whatever Trump does, I'm going to take his word and go with it. He's the best guy on the planet.
Holy crap. Keep this guy in mind when I go on my little vent after we're done this segment.
He says his tariffs are working, and in return, he's giving back to the U.S. service members. They're getting close to $1,800 a month now, he says, because of the tariffs. What do you think about that?
I think they should give them a lot more money than that.
A lot more of your money. I mean, a tariff is essentially a tax on the U.S. consumer. So in reality, he's taking your money and handing it to the service members. And if you're okay with that, then just expect to have less money yourself.
So, what did you think of the president's speech last night?
I think it was amazing. Yeah, I think he's doing very good for the country.
And just think, there's 77 million more people just like this guy.
Well, I also spoke with another local woman who didn't want to be on camera, but she told me the only thing she agrees with Trump on is giving money to military members from the tariffs. And the president's speech comes as Americans remain divided over the state of the economy and the direction of the country, with many saying they're waiting to see whether promised reforms translate into real relief at the grocery store, the gas pump, and the cost of housing.
Don't count on it. In fact, I think 2026 is really going to mark the beginning of the deeper decline in the US economy, along with the increased isolation. Now, there's a reason I showed you this report. It's because this is proof that even after Trump is gone, there is no going back to normal. I say this because of a rant that I did on my previous video, where a so-called US citizen who claimed not to like Trump said that everything will go back to normal like nothing ever happened once he was gone. These three regular average citizens, the ones that you just saw, are exactly why this is not going to happen. Why? Because when Trump leaves, he also leaves the door wide open for right-leaning US citizens to continue the current trend of hate, racism, fascism, and authoritarian behavior. I won't forget that these three people are part of the reason we're in this mess, because of how they voted. Even if a Democratic president is in office, those people are still going to be around. They're still going to be running their mouths. They're still going to be pushing the same narratives. And they'll still continue to see Canada as a 51st state. So let this be a reminder to everyone watching right now. Trump is just the mouthpiece for the hate and racism we're seeing. But these three people, along with the 77 million who voted for them, are the ones that are propping him up. Now moving on, there are a few additional segments from the interview with the Canadian law professor that I wanted to show everyone.
This is a shocking number, I think, for a lot of people. I know that you've pointed out in various interviews that it used to be if your paperwork wasn't in order or there were any immigration questions, they would send you back up to Canada. Now people are being held. What grounds are most Canadians being held for?
Well, the statistics reveal that the vast majority of Canadians in detention are there because of what we would consider to be relatively minor offenses, everything from visa anomalies to impaired driving to property crime. But certainly there are a percentage of Canadians in detention who have a criminal history, in some cases a very long ago criminal history that didn't preclude them from entering the United States, but has now caught them in a dragnet.
This is the big question mark that nobody really knows the answer to. What used to be okay with CBP, but might not be anymore. Thankfully, I have a clean record, so I really don't have to worry about this. But what if you don't? What if you had a minor infraction when you were a teenager, and you've been traveling to the United States regularly with zero issues? Could that same infraction suddenly become a problem now? I'm not someone who likes to gamble when it comes to crossing the border. So if I had anything in my past, I'd be extremely cautious about traveling to the US right now. I'm going to fast forward a bit here, because the law professor goes into how things have intensified.
However, things have intensified under President Trump in the extreme. So we are now seeing effectively mass detentions. And indeed, days after President Trump assumed office, he spoke about his commitment to a policy of mass detention and mass deportation. And that's exactly what he's doing. So we're seeing way higher numbers than before. And we're also seeing exactly the opposite of what he said he was going to do when he assumed office, which was, quote unquote, to focus on the worst of the worst. In other words, he said that American policies would focus on people who were serious criminals and serious threats.
Let's not forget that there's currently over 400 Canadians being detained right now, and there's very little information available. We don't know why they were detained, or what their condition is, or what's happening to them. From what I've read, there's also children being detained as well. What I do know is that every single Canadian and every single international traveler that's still going to the US is putting themselves at risk for being scrutinized at the border, or at the very least being treated rudely by CBP. No one is immune.
Most of the infractions for Canadians, so I understand, are because of invalid visas. How were these cases typically handled in the past, and what's happening now?
Indeed. Those kind of visa anomalies would typically require someone to report for removal and involve effectively self-deportation or voluntary departure. You know, they were not uncommon. Canadian snowbirds overstaying the length of their allowed number of days would receive the paperwork, they would report, and they would voluntarily depart.
Now, don't forget, I did a previous video about the confusion surrounding that stupid form that the snowbirds are supposed to fill out if they're in the US for more than 30 days. That was officially announced. But there was a report that interviewed snowbirds who still insisted on going south, being told directly by CBP that they did not need that form. That right there is a huge problem. This confusion between whether or not the form is required and CBP saying you don't need it creates the perfect storm for someone to get nailed with a visa violation. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if later in the spring, when it's time for the snowbirds to come home, some of those same snowbirds who were told that the form wasn't needed, they'll end up getting stopped at the border.
Now we're seeing those cases treated in a very different manner.
Can you explain that more?
Well, people are, as you know, being arrested and detained, and sometimes for a lengthy period of time. I mean, we know of a case of a Canadian man actually dying in detention. There's another case of a woman held for a very long period of time. So we're seeing people held for days, if not weeks or longer. That's what's changed.
And a reminder to people, if you are planning a trip to the U.S., make sure your paperwork is in order. If you are detained, Sherry, quickly remind us of what happens now once you are detained.
Well, you are effectively put in the queue for expedited removal. Depending on how long you were in the United States, you may have access to judicial review or an appeal of that decision. But there's whole categories of people who don't, and that particular law is actually currently under challenge in the United States. In other words, the legal authority for pushing people out of the country very swiftly. But effectively, you're locked up, and the only way to get out is really with legal counsel, and it's very hard to access counsel when you're detained.
Correct.
Not only hard, but also expensive as well. And I don't want anyone to end up in that situation, not even my haters, because the conditions being reported inside the detention facilities are inhumane and brutal. I'm going to stop the interview here, but if you want to watch the full interview, the link is in the description below. To close off this video, I wanted to bring this interview up again to really drive home the point that things are different now. For anyone watching this, or for those of you who know people who are still very nonchalant about what's going on, you might want to forward them my video. Or better yet, forward them the link in the description so they can hear directly from the law professor themselves. There are simply too many variables that can change on a dime, or at any given hour. And some of those variables are completely out of your control, like your skin color or nationality. But one thing we do have control over is whether or not we choose to go to the United States. That's it for today's video. I hope this brought some value to you, and if it did, please help the channel out by hitting the like and subscribe button below. And if you're still watching up to this point, thank you for sticking around to the end, because it really does help the algorithm push my video out to more people. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.